Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, and this is the 38th episode of the Curtain Calls with the Crypto Hipster. This episode is entitled, Ain't We Funkin' Now? How blockchain technology through innovation and education are causing breakthroughs in some funky cool markets. This episode is a compilation of four clips, four podcasts, from one from season 6, one from season 7, and two from season 8. The first podcast we spoke with, first person I spoke with, two people in season 7, and this was part of my shooting from the hip conversation series, which I had about 15 of these. Or just got in the call, asked the questions, no advanced anything, just shoot from the hip. And conversation was with it was in May 2024 with Deniz Kalaslioglu. I can't even pronounce the man's name. I'm sorry. He's the co-founder and CTO of Soarchain, and then Marko Baricevic, who's the product lead at Cosmos-SDK. And we spoke about shaping the decentralized future of mobility markets. That's one of the funky cool markets, is the mobility markets. Second interview, and this man's name is much easier to pronounce, Sai Lee. And I spoke in January 25 during season 8, January 10, 2025. And he is the director at the Ethereum Collective Foundation. And we talked about why raising the benchmark in blockchain education is important. And we discussed several areas where if you do that, then it'll impact some funky cool products and markets. Third, this is from season 6, and it's in November 2023. I talked with David Bchiri, who is the president at XRPL Commons. We talked about democratizing blockchain education as a first step to solving Web3 developer shortages. Last but not least, an amazing conversation at the very beginning of season 8 with Firdosh Sheikh. And she is the founder and CEO of DRIFE. We talked in September, end of September 27, 2024. We talked about how to revolutionize the ride-sharing economy through Web3 innovation. Again, these podcasts in their entirety are available anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. They get published on Spotify, but they reach out. The reaches to YouTube, to Google, to Apple, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast on the web or on apps. And again, the title of this it's episode 38. Ain't we funkin' now? Funkin apostrophe. Ain't we funkin' now? Groovy, right? How blockchain technology through innovation and education are causing breakthroughs in some funky cool markets. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This is episode 38. I have a total of 67, so we're more than halfway on our way. And I hope you tune in, have a listen. If you like this, like I said, you can download any one of the entire episodes in their entirety. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in.
But there's tremendous potential in the mobility market. How are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? And what's realistic and achievable versus what's a VC funded monorail commercial?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, that's like the question that keeps me at night, basically. And like initially, I mentioned that like I was working on autonomous vehicles, so it is fairly easy to like produce an autonomous vehicle, let's say level 3, level 3.5, maybe 4, in a controlled environment for a single vehicle. But when you put hundreds of these vehicles at the same place, they just cannot operate, because this is where I like refer to the lack of a connectivity layer. So that's why we actually went out to create this connectivity layer. So we saw all of this as a connectivity layer to connect the vehicles to each other, to the cloud, to the infrastructure, and also to the people, to the road users, to generalize. And I mean, the mobility market itself is already like almost like $1 trillion industry, maybe more. It depends on what you include in it. But the problem is that from this $1 trillion industry, the benefit that the end user gets is fairly low. And this is mostly due to, again, all the reasons that I've counted, like the closed ecosystem, the competing, and like these car companies, or like all of these companies could be collaborating, and they would actually be, everyone would be earning more, including the end users. So it's not a zero-sum game. Like if they were to collaborate, the technology would be advanced, would be would advance faster, and ultimately we would have these autonomous cars. I'm not so bullish on the flying cars yet, and I'm not so sure about its function, to be honest. But ultimately, the mobility would be evolved into something um, of a very shared nature, where instead of like having your own vehicle, maybe you would be subscribed to a service where you could get vehicle. I mean, basically like a decentralized Uber like application, which would encapsulate all your needs, including so you wouldn't, as an end user, you wouldn't have to deal with all these services, taxes, insurance, etc. You would probably just be paying something, one subscription fee, and you would get a seamless mobility experience. So that's how I envision the mobility would be. And to be honest, that would be the realistic path, instead of every single one of us having a flying car and flying within the cities. Yeah, that would also be cool, but I'm more for a shared ecosystem.
Can you
What do you
remind me
think?
can you remind me what the question was?
Yeah, the true potential of the mobility market, and how do we get there?
So okay, so I'm gonna keep it short because I have this like one theory of like the whole mobility market, but it's not entirely focused on the mobility as a service market. No, I think it's like it's right now we're in this place where for the last almost 100 years, the last 80 years, the last 60 years, we've kind of been doing the same thing. And it's working to a certain extent. There's still a lot of overhead with managing everything, and things aren't seamlessly integrated. There's inefficiencies in this information retrieval from cars. You need to plug something in, you need to go to the DMV, you need to do this stuff. It is like it works, but like in an advancing world, in a lot faster moving world, we do need to like push the bounds of what's possible. And it's like having seamless integration, continuous information feeds into cars, into mobility vehicles that allow people to a lot more efficiently do different things, but also a lot more efficiently do insurances, like get around cities. There's like the list can really go on as far as you can think, and this is really where the whole mobility space is kind of going. It's getting there slow and steady, slower than we would like. Of course, like I mean, Dennis and I work in the blockchain space. You've been in the blockchain space yourself. Like the last 2 years, I think there's been like 10 years of innovation. And then when we step outside of our bubble and go to these normal work and go to this normal Web 2, like mobility and stuff, those are that for them, 10 years is a drop in the bucket. And so that's the hardest part, I think, for a lot of crypto people to be able to see that future 10 years out when we are working on timescales that are fractions of those, because the partnerships, the distribution of devices, the distribution of the network effect is the hardest thing and the thing that takes decades. And we're trying to accelerate that. We have the means to accelerate it, but it's more so the world needs to catch up.
First of all, I'm going to disagree with you. You said talking about decentralization is not sexy, right? I'm going to ask you, what's possible now in the earth or on the planet with people at the intersection of technology, finance, and social that wasn't possible before we had decentralization?
That's a fair point. I mean, like we always talk about mass adoption. We're talking about how do we get more utility? We have all these cool projects, but no one uses them. We're all focused on vehicles that give us the bottles and the models and the fast cars and designer brands. But we can't we don't have any true utility. I think at DevCon a couple months ago, Vitalik said the best use case of a blockchain uh, uh, other than crypto is ENS, um, which is a very low benchmark, I think. I mean, there's a lot of cool things that we can use blockchain for in impact, in climate, in governance. It's just I think since COVID, we have lost our juice in being the pioneers and being the solvers that this industry strives for so much.
Okay, I'm going to write that down. We lost the juice. I'm going to come back to that. Okay.
All right.
The second point I had, is you said if somebody sits down for 2 hours, they can learn the technology. I remember when I first got into crypto, and blockchain, I think I read the Bitcoin white paper like 20 times before I started to understand it. And I think that it took months of a steeper learning curve, I guess learning curve now. What's the best way that somebody who's not tech savvy, who's never had an experience in blockchain can start to learn, or is that learning curve still very steep?
That's a great question. So what we did was there's about 170 something core concepts to the Ethereum blockchain. And we took each concept and we turned it into a story. So anyone from 5 to 50-year-old is able to understand it through analogy. And the University of Ethereum is core education structure is based on a piece of AI. I know AI is a different topic, but it's mostly about AI takeover, how to find the shortcuts, how to replace jobs, and about efficiency. But what we're using AI for is more so a positive sum game, where you're teaching the thought to teach others. It utilizes semantic similarities to validate your comprehension. So Richard Feynman said, you don't know something well enough unless you can say it in your own words. So after you read each analogy-based story to capture each concept, you have to summarize what you have learned through an open-ended question prompt. And then the AI validates whether you learned the material well enough or not. If not, it will make suggestions to help you better your answer. So it's not one of those multiple choice things you see from like those learn and earn or earn and learn type of styles. It's intended to help you actually have a better concept of each core subject.
You mentioned this twice already. You said that we got tanked as an industry for the past 2 years, right? You had developers who left, right? And we need to recreate this environment of trust. How do you think we can recreate this environment of trust so that we can build a robust future for the developers and the community going forward?
I think addressing hard use cases, the one that are creating value outside of the speculative value is what's going to be change, to improve drastically this space. So having used blockchain for a particular use case in a particular industry and really improving this process by a 10x factor or a 100x factor is really something that will make an impact, that will change for good, that will make other industries want to move to the space and say, oh, you tokenized your debt management using blockchain and AI, or there can also be a convergence of technologies there, but using blockchain and making a shift for the final user, I'm not talking about developer here, the final user, changing the way they work by saying we have used a new tool that will totally transform the way you work, that will trigger a chain reaction. Other industries will want to do the same thing. I think we haven't done a good job as an ecosystem, at the global Web3 ecosystem, to prove the value of using blockchain. And the media have really made a feast on the beast about saying that the whole blockchain ecosystem was boiled really down to just crypto, and not even the good part of crypto. Crypto can be an amazing tool. Programmatic money is fascinating. The number of things you can do with digital money, you can basically transform the way a country works, or the global economy works. But the way the media have talked about the crypto in the last 2 years was really, crypto is bad because it's speculation. It doesn't create value, only for a few happy few who know what they're doing, and the rest of the world is losing money. And they were really focusing on that, and they shaped a narrative where it was hard for the people in the space to defend what they were doing. So I really want to work on that narrative again, and show the world there's real value in using blockchain, and not just any sort of database. If you use blockchain in a particular use case, you transform the way this industry works. Let's take the example of retail. On the value chain of retail, there's factory processing, the whole traceability of goods, where the raw material come from, that is something you can do internally on a database. But if you decentralize that, suddenly you make it bulletproof to any attack or any sort of you make your supply chain very trustworthy. And then going down the chain, if you look at the second-hand market, if you're selling luxury goods, there's a real value in knowing where the product is going after it's sold, and keeping this level of trust for the final user, knowing that it's a real bag or it's a real leather good that comes from this factory that was made by hand, because this is the claim that the brand is making. I think there's a real value in implementing that kind of solutions. And if you do it on a blockchain, then it's bulletproof.
I think I saw that you're in Dubai and Singapore, right? What have been some of the early challenges in those markets? And then as you expect, what do you see as some of the challenges around the globe?
Yeah, so we are live in India and Dubai. Singapore, we recently did a POC for token 2049, where we went to Singapore and did RIFE. We're not live in Singapore, although we do have plans for coming years. But currently, we're live in India and Dubai. So I'll speak about the challenges in Dubai. Dubai, we recently launched. For us, it was because Dubai is a very complicated, very regulated place. The first thing was obviously to crack the license. And as I said, having the franchising model actually helped us to get the license in place, because we got a local existing player who was looking to expand their business into the ride sharing space, but they knew how to build the technology around that. And we told them okay, get the license, we'll get the application ready to launch in Dubai. So regulation wise, Dubai is very strict about how things work here. So licensing was difficult for us. It's just very early for us to comment on what all challenges we will face when we are fully live in Dubai, because it's very early. It's been 15 days into operation in Dubai. India, I can speak about challenges because it's been 2 years we are live in India. A bigger challenge is always competing against the existing players when they get into price war. And it always happen whenever you try to do something or run some campaigns, you'll always see them dropping their price to like the lowest they can because they have that kind of money to put in. And that's why it is very important for us that both driver and rider understand the narrative of why DRIFE was built, which was to give back to the driver and the rider community. And we have a very strong community of drivers who believe in the fact that DRIFE was built from a perspective of driver at first, that when you meet drivers in India who drive for DRIFE, they'll tell you that, please keep using DRIFE because I make more money. And that adds a lot to you as a user when you have to make that decision or shift from existing platform to a new platform, like why I am doing that. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get a similar kind of a cab. Similar driver might end up picking you up with Uber or DRIFE. What is making me to choose DRIFE is the whole sentiment value that someone's going to make more money if I make that wise choice. So it's more about like moving people to have a wiser choice. We're still working around it. We still try to do like new things to make that something which is like about the narrative that we want to build.
Got it. So the pain, like I'm trying to think. I've been in blockchain since 2017, and a lot of people in blockchain buy things to be part of a community, but that's not how the rest of the world works. The rest of the world works is they buy something, you pay for something to solve a pain point, right? So people have pain points with the ride-hailing industry, right?
Correct.
How can blockchain-based apps restore confidence in the ride-hailing industry and remove some of those pain points that people are facing?
See, the bigger challenge, as I spoke earlier also in the ride-hailing space, is about transparency and fairness. Start with a very basic of a surge price that you paid today. You can never go to Uber and ask like, why did I pay 2x of the price? Nobody can prove that there was a demand and supply difference, and that's why the price increased. When we use blockchain to do fair calculation, that's a very basic that we do, where we use blockchain to do fair calculation for you, where you as a company is not adding different multiplier depending upon different users and their purchasing capacity. That's a very beginning of how you can restore confidence among the both driver and rider about being a part of a ride-hailing experience that is decentralized, starting with the matchmaking process. We need blockchain implementation on the places where transparency is a bigger issue, and it starts with the fair calculation and driver allocation, and that's where we use blockchain also to make sure that every individual within the ecosystem is treated equally and see similar fare for same distance and same time, and we don't add multipliers from our side. And you can always go and verify your ride, like why you paid for what you paid on chain, and there's no human intervention there. And that's a beginning of how decentralized applications can actually be a better version of existing Web2 application that exists today.